Welcome back to our news bulletin. In Afghanistan, 10 security personnel have been killed in clashes with the Taliban following a car bomb attack at a government compound in Samangan province. Officials say 54 people were wounded in the attack close to the office of the National Security Directorate. They added that the attack ended after 4 gunmen died following clashes with security forces. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for the attack. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid claimed that 70 NDS members were killed or wounded in the attack. Meanwhile, people of Jammu and Kashmir living at both sides of the line of control are observing the 89th Kashmir Martyrs' Day today. The day is being observed with a renewed pledge to continue the struggle for Kashmiris' right to self-determination. More in this report.
As the Kashmiri freedom struggle in the face of Indian tyranny continues under New Delhi's illegal annexation, the Kashmir Martyrs' Day reminds the world of almost a century of sacrifices by the resilient people of the occupied valley. On the 13th of July 1931, 22 brave Muslims protested against the oppression of Dogra regime and were martyred outside Srinagar in cold blood. After abrogation of the Article 370 in December 2019, the Indian government dropped Kashmir Martyrs' Day from its list of public holidays for 2020. Instead, New Delhi added October 26th to the list to be observed as the Accession Day, which was in fact the day of occupation of Jammu and Kashmir. The All Parties Hurriyat Conference has called for a complete strike in the valley to observe the day. Veteran Kashmiri politician Syed Ali Gilani says the people of occupied Kashmir have not and will not submit to Indian oppression.
Indian troops have killed 2 more people in the Islamabad district of occupied Kashmir. This brings the death toll from violence by Indian troops to 13 this month. The renewed violence comes as Kashmiris are observing Martyrs' Day to pay homage to the victims of 1931 massacre. In his message on Martyrs' Day, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan said the day is not far away when Kashmir will be liberated from illegal Indian occupation. Khan said the martyrs were the forefathers of the Kashmiri resistance movement. He added that Pakistan has always remained steadfast in its support for the Kashmiris' right to self-determination and will continue to do so. Now, Pakistan's Foreign Office has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to protest ceasefire violations by Indian forces along the line of control. In a statement, the Foreign Office said Indian forces are continuously targeting civilians from across the line of control. Earlier, the Pakistan Army said 6 civilians were wounded in unprovoked Indian firing along the line of control. The military's media wing said an 11-year-old girl and 2 women were among those wounded in Khoreta and Rakhchikhri sectors. The military said Pakistani troops effectively responded to Indian firing. In another news, Mexico has overtaken Italy to become the world's 4th worst hit country from COVID-19. The country reported 276 more fatalities as the tally crossed 35,000. Brazil's daily deaths have fallen to 635 from the previous day's 1,071, with the toll over 72,000. Globally, the virus has killed over 569,000 people and infected 12.9 million. Further details in this report.
With the Americas struggling to contain the coronavirus pandemic, experts warn the real number of cases can be far higher due to testing lags. But US President Donald Trump is pressing schools to reopen, threatening to cut funds to those who defy the policy. Meanwhile, Japan and the US are sharing information about coronavirus cases at US military bases in Okinawa Prefecture. Down south, Argentina's cases topped 100,000 as the outbreak spirals out of control despite restrictive measures. The government says it will continue extending the lockdowns until the situation improves.
We believe this peak will plateau and not decrease for a while. That is the most dangerous thing, being at a peak for a long time. That is what is going to make beds fill up much faster and the intensive care beds get quickly occupied.
South Africa has introduced new restrictions including nighttime curfew, compulsory face covering, and a ban on alcohol sales. After Victoria, Australia is now fearing a second wave in the most populous state, New South Wales. 40 new cases emerged with a growing cluster at a pub used by freight drivers in the state. In Spain, Catalonia's regional government has confined residents to their home after registering 816 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours.
Que les hem de prendre ara, precisament.
They are complicated measures, but we believe that we must apply them now precisely to not to reach a worse situation that leads us to depend on these measures and others as a total and harder confinement. Therefore, we are attacking this complex situation now in order to overcome it.
Ara,
In Asia, the Philippines has reported 162 new coronavirus deaths, the country's largest single-day increase. South Korea's new virus cases have increased as imported cases and cluster infections in major cities continues to rise. The country added 62 cases, including 19 local infections, with the total infections crossing 13,000, while mainland China has reported only 8 new coronavirus cases.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, another 69 people have died of COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, with the death toll rising to 5,266. The Ministry of Health says 2,769 new cases were detected, with the tally crossing 251,000. The ministry said nearly 162,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. Officials said some 1,800 patients are critically ill. While there are over 84,000 active cases in the country, the province of Sindh is worst hit by the virus with over 105,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 87,000 cases. Now, Beijing has announced sanctions on top American lawmakers after the U.S. imposed Xinjiang-related curbs on Chinese officials. In a briefing, China's foreign ministry spokesperson said the U.S. has no right and is in no position to interfere in Xinjiang affairs. Among those targeted are Senators Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, along with Republican Congressman Chris Smith. Beijing also imposed sanctions on the U.S. Congressional Executive Commission on China. The nature of the sanctions, however, is not yet clear. In Hong Kong, hundreds of thousands of people have voted in pro-democracy primaries despite warnings that doing so may breach a new security law. The two-day vote will determine the opposition candidates for September's elections to the Legislative Council. Organizers set a target of 170,000 voters across the weekend, but officials said more than 600,000 people took part. Long queues formed with people voting via their mobile phones after having their identities verified. The Turkish and Russian presidents have discussed developments in Libya and Syria as well as other regional issues over the phone. In a statement, Ankara's communications directorate said Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Vladimir Putin agreed to maintain coordination for regional stability. The statement said the two leaders also discussed steps to strengthen economic relations and cooperation against COVID-19. Meanwhile, Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said Libya's government will not benefit if a ceasefire is declared in the country right now. In an interview, the minister said the coastal city of Sirte and Jufra Air Base need to be turned over to the GNA before it agrees to a ceasefire. He said Turkey would also start drilling operations in the Mediterranean under an agreement signed between Ankara and Tripoli. Yemen's Houthi rebels have claimed hitting multiple Saudi facilities in a large-scale operation. Houthi spokesperson Yahya Sarai says military and oil installations in Jizan, Najran and Asi regions were targeted with ballistic missiles and drones. Sarai said dozens of military officials were killed and wounded in the raid on Tawavin camp in Marib. He said the operation was a response to Saudi-led coalition's aggression in Hajjah province, which killed 10 people. Meanwhile, Riyadh says it shot down 2 Houthi ballistic missiles and 6 drones launched from Yemen towards Saudi Arabia. Coalition spokesperson Colonel Turki al-Malki said the attack targeted citizens and civilian infrastructure. Iraq's military says 5 ISIS fighters and 2 security personnel were killed in a raid on a militant's hideout near Baghdad. In a statement, the military said the fighters were killed in a land and air-backed operation by the Iraqi forces and the US-led coalition. The military said an Iraqi force affiliated with the intelligence service struck ISIS targets in a village southwest of Baghdad. It said the troops backed by an international coalition drone killed 4 suicide bombers while the 5th blew himself up. ISIS gained full control in Mosul, Salahuddin and Anbar provinces and seized territories in Diyala and Kirkuk provinces in 2014, but Iraqi security forces managed to regain control in subsequent years. In Israel, 6 people have been wounded in clashes with police in West Jerusalem. The incident happened while the police were evacuating the protesters in front of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence. In a statement, protest organizers said a group of about 30 policemen attacked the encampment, but the authorities denied accusations of using violence against the demonstrators. The protest was part of Black Flags movement, which demands Netanyahu's resignation. Netanyahu is the first Israeli prime minister to face trial while in office. He denies accusations of bribery and breach of trust. Four Azeri soldiers have been killed as troops from Azerbaijan and Armenia clashed on their border in a new escalation. Baku's defense ministry said 3 of the soldiers were killed yesterday in the artillery fire that erupted near Tavush region. The clashes also wounded 2 Armenian troops and 5 Azeri soldiers. Armenia's defense ministry said Azerbaijan resumed shelling its positions on Monday after a night of clashes. The countries have accused each other of imitating the fire. Meanwhile, Turkey's foreign ministry said Ankara will continue to stand by Azerbaijan in its struggle to protect its territorial integrity. Ivory Coast's Vice President Daniel Keblan Duncan has resigned, citing personal reasons. A top aide to President Alassane Ouattara confirmed the development while speaking to the reporters. The resignation comes days after the sudden death of Prime Minister Amadou Gon Goulelbi. He was the ruling party's candidate for October presidential elections. Despite several years of relative peace, ethnic and regional rivalries still linger in the country. This year's election is being seen as a test of stability for Ivory Coast, which is the world's top cocoa producer and one of West Africa's largest economies. We're now taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. In Poland, incumbent President Andrzej Duda has won re-election, narrowly beating rival Rafał Trzaskowski. The National Electoral Commission says Duda won over 51% of the vote, while Trzaskowski received nearly 49%. The election body said record turnout was witnessed on the polling day, and 68% of registered voters cast their votes. Duda has strongly backed most government changes to the judiciary, which the EU says have undermined the rule of law. The election was widely seen as a battle for the country's future, as well as its strained relations with the EU. The president is an ally of the ruling Law and Justice Party, who earlier said the final vote count will show seriousness of the challenge opposition poses.
Like I said during the campaign, there is and there must be a place for everyone under the white and red flag, our common flag, and the national anthem. And all of us should work to make sure that everyone feels that there is a place for them.
21 people have been hospitalized after an explosion and fire on board a U.S. Navy ship at San Diego Naval Base. U.S. Navy spokesperson Mike Rainey says the 17 sailors and 4 civilians did not have life-threatening injuries. Another spokesperson, Rear Admiral Charles Brown said injured sailors mostly sustained smoke inhalation and minor burns. He said about 160 sailors were on board and all have been accounted for, while the ship normally carries a crew of about 1,000. Commander of Navy's Expeditionary Strike Group 3, Rear Admiral Philip Sobeck, said the cause of the explosion was unclear.
Brave sailors and commands or ships all around San Diego are fighting to save USS Bonhammer Shard. Alongside our friends at Federal Fire in San Diego, we learned that approximately 08:30 this morning, a fire was reported in the lower vehicle storage area on board Bonhammer Shard.
In New Zealand, the gunman behind these shootings at 2 Christchurch mosques has sacked his lawyers and opted to represent himself. This has raised fears that Tarrant will use a sentencing hearing next month to promote his white supremacist views. At a pre-sentencing hearing, High Court Judge Cameron Mander allowed Tarrant's lawyers to withdraw from proceedings at the request of their client. But the judge ordered standby counsel to be available next month in case Tarrant changes his mind. Australian national Brenton Tarrant will be sentenced on August 24th on 51 murder convictions, 40 of attempted murder and 1 of terrorism. He has pleaded guilty to the charges. In Nigeria, 22 people have been killed in armed attacks on some villages of the Kaduna state. Police say many others have been wounded and kidnapped in the Zangon-Kataf area. Officials said the armed militants attacked Kigudu community close to Chibok in Atiyab chiefdom. They said 10 women were among those killed. Authorities said security forces were sent to the area while a 24-hour curfew was imposed. The country's northwest sees occasional clashes between the herd of Fulani people and neighboring sedentary tribes. Malaysia's Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has narrowly won a motion to remove the Parliament's Speaker. The move came as Parliament resumed after months of delay because of the coronavirus pandemic. Lawmakers engaged in heated debates over Muhyiddin's proposal to replace the House Speaker Muhammad Arif Mad Yusuf with his own candidate. Voting showed the government secured 111 votes against 109 for the opposition, with 1 absent and another unaccounted for. Former Election Commission Chairman Azhar Azizan Haroon was chosen as the new Speaker. Muhyiddin's legitimacy has been challenged by the opposition since he was sworn in on the 1st of March after a week-long political crisis. The foreign ministers of Libya and Italy have discussed ways to deal with irregular migration in a telephone conversation. Spokesman of Libya's foreign ministry Mohammed Al-Kablawi said the two leaders also discussed measures taken by Tripoli on the issue. Libya lies on a major migration route to Europe as it struggles to end the aggravating civil war between the GNA and the LNA. Earlier, the country's President Fayez al-Sarraj attended the opening ceremony of an immigration coordination center in Malta. The death toll in Japan after a week of torrential downpours which caused severe floods and landslides has risen to 70. State media said there are 13 people still missing. The Fire and Disaster Management Agency says at least 12,600 homes and buildings in 20 prefectures have been destroyed, damaged or flooded. Meteorological officials said further heavy rains are expected over the next 2 days and some regions may receive up to 12 inches of rain. State media said Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will visit flood-affected areas in Kumamoto Prefecture today. The southern island of Kyushu has been battered by heavy rains for more than a week. In South Africa, the daughter of former South African president and liberation hero Nelson Mandela has died at the age of 59. Zinzi Mandela rose to prominence when she heard out her father's rejection of a conditional release from prison in 1985. In a statement, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said that she was a fearless political activist who was a leader in her own right. Ramaphosa said he is deeply saddened by the passing of Zinzi Mandela. Zinzi Mandela was posted in Denmark in 2015 and was designated to become head of mission in Liberia. She was raised in Soweto town and got her education in both South Africa and Swaziland. The cause of her death has not been revealed yet. American actress and wife of Hollywood heartthrob John Travolta, Kelly Preston, has died at the age of 57. She battled breast cancer for nearly 2 years. Preston is famous for her roles in blockbusters such as Jerry Maguire and Twins. Preston met Travolta in 1988 when they appeared together in a film called The Experts and married on September 5, 1991 in Paris.
Kelly would actually bring her girlfriends over to have me do Shapiro.
I loved it so much.
She was so entertained by my interpretation that she one day woke me up and said, "Come on, do Robert for them." So, oh gosh, honey,
Pakistan has decided to resume Afghan exports through the Wagah border crossing from July 15th after implementing COVID-19 protocols. The Foreign Ministry says the decision was taken at the special request of Kabul to facilitate transit trade with India. With this step, Pakistan has now restored bilateral trade and Afghan transit trade at all border crossing terminals to pre-COVID-19 status. Spokesperson Aisha Faruqi said Islamabad remains fully committed to further strengthening its bilateral relations with Kabul. The UK has urged businesses and individuals to prepare for the end of Brexit transition period on December 31st. This comes as the government kick-started a new information campaign titled UK's New Start, Let's Get Going. The information campaign will begin today with advertisements appearing on TV, radio, billboards and online. The UK Senior Minister for Brexit, Michael Gove, says progress is being made in trade talks with the EU, but there are still divisions. But he said Britain is leaving the single market and customs union with or without a deal by year end. In June, the UK officially told EU it will not seek extension to the transition period beyond December 31st. In Libya, the National Oil Corporation has accused the UAE of instructing Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces to disrupt the country's oil output and exports. It referred to a recent comment by Haftar, who said output will continue to be interrupted if certain conditions were not met. The corporation said it has reimposed force majeure on all oil exports to limit its responsibilities arising from agreements. It alleged the instructions to halt oil production came from the UAE to Haftar's forces. The NOC said the act was disappointing and urged the UN Security Council to call those responsible to account. Libya, with the largest oil reserves in Africa, can produce 1.2 million barrels of crude oil per day. US stocks are trading higher as investors cheered signs of progress in COVID-19 vaccine development. All three major Wall Street indices are trading higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained about 1.5%. The S&P 500 is trading higher by over 1%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index also gained over 1.5%. Meanwhile, oil prices slipped in early trade as trade is eyed on OPEC technical meeting this week. European stock markets have advanced despite surging COVID-19 cases in some parts of the world. The regional stocks are witnessing fresh rally as investors approach quarterly and yearly earnings season. Frankfurt's DAX is trading nearly 1% higher. London's FTSE 100 has gained nearly 1% after G4S stocks jumped nearly 9%. CAC 40 in Paris is also gaining ground to surge nearly 0.5%. In Asia, Nikkei 225 led the gains, closing over 2% higher. Seoul's Kospi and China's Shanghai Composite gained over 1.5% each. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude has lost over 1% despite recovery in global oil demand. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.